This month, for our September Lunch and Learn, we're actually going to, instead of showing new content, we're going to be reviewing some existing content, which came from a request that we received from one of our clients. So we were asked to review these steps for building a scenario in TransIT. So that is what I'm going to focus on today. Here. Okay, so this is kind of my method for when I am working with new clients and when I am building out scenarios with a client. So, when you start getting used to TransIT, one thing that can always be tricky for people is to figure out how to find the content that exists inside TransIT already. And that can be because you're not quite familiar with our naming convention. So, when we create at a global level, when we create content in TransIT, we use the naming convention noun, comma, verb with a additional descriptor inside the brackets. So for some people that can be what holds them up trying to figure out what the appropriate noun comma verb is when they're searching for our content. So my recommendation to new clients when they're getting started in TransIT is think about what you're seeing on your screen in the application that you're working in when you're searching for content. So let's say that the window that opens when you click an icon is the add order window. Or let's say you're searching, you're doing things that are registration or appointment related, and you have a conversation that's opening, or you have the add allergy window or home medication, whatever the case is. Start by searching for those things, because when we're creating content in TransIT, we call out specifically what the window is called when it opens inside TransIT. So you have your search features that are at the top here. So what I would recommend is clicking the drop down arrow here and selecting any field. When you select any field, that's going to search the task from both the outside of the task, which is what I consider this here, and the inside of the task. So as I mentioned, searching for things that you see on the window. So let's say you're working with orders and you know that the window that opens when you start searching for or adding orders is the add order window. You can type in this field here, add order, and press enter. And then you can see there's a whole collection of things that open for either entering an order or documenting details on an order. And if you're wanting to see what is listed on the inside of that task, you can hover your cursor over the description column here, and that's going to tell you what the steps are on the inside of the task. Or, of course, you could also click on the task name, which is going to open the task in an additional tab over here. And then you can see, okay, so the step for this task is click plus add. And when you do that, the add order window is opened. So in this case, this is when you're working in FirstNet. So you're clicking to add an order and the add order window opens. I'm going to close that tab here. So once you start to get familiar with what things are called at a task level, you can start to see where these tasks are used. So if you hover your cursor in this number column here, you can see where the task is used inside either a workflow or inside a scenario. So if I click this number link here, you can see that this shows that the task here is used in this first scenario, but it's also used in all of these different workflows as well. And so that gives you an idea of how to search when you go into the workflow level. I also mentioned conversations. So I'm going to type conversation in the search here. And you can see that there's a bunch of different tasks. We've got appointment that uses conversation. We've got adding a person, which uses conversation, and then visit. So I'm going to flip over to workflows now. So I'm going to select workflows here. And I'm going to do a similar search. So I can, when I'm looking in the search field here, I can search either by any field, the specific name, number, and description, or the vendor. It's going to be more tricky to search by a specific name, number, or description. So I always recommend going with the any field option. So I'm going to go with conversation again here. And then you can see that these are all of the workflows that have conversation listed somewhere inside the task. So whether that's inside the step of the task or inside the description here. And so then I can click on my workflow here and I can see what's on the inside of the workflow. So that's how you can go about searching for the content that's in transit. So when you start to find the content that you're looking for, it's important to make sure that you review the workflows that are out there before you start inserting them into a scenario that you have. So we document workflows at a global level, and then you can import those workflows into your build. But you want to make sure that before you start adding them into individual scenarios, that you are reviewing the steps of the scenario. So this is for registering a patient in access management. And so if we scroll down a little bit here, not everybody may be familiar with registration, but in Cerner, there's a variety of different tabs that you have to complete when you're completing a patient registration. And so here's a step for the information tab. If I scroll lower, here's the guarantor information tab, additional contact information tab. But depending on how your build is, your organization gets to decide the order that those tabs appear in. So at a global level, the workflow may say that the tabs display in this particular order, but that may not be the case for your organization. So you want to make sure that if it's actually a different tab that displays here as opposed to the encounter information tab, or if you call the encounter information tab something completely different, you want to make sure that you update your workflow before you start inserting it into scenarios. The next thing that we recommend that you do when you're looking at the workflows that you're going to be using is select the most likely position that's going to be the person completing the workflow at the scenario level. So in this case, we've selected the reg clerk as the position that's going to be completing this workflow. And I would say probably 9.5 times out of 10, that's going to be the correct position that's going to be used inside a scenario when using this workflow. And so by selecting it here, it saves you the moment of having to select it once you insert that task inside. Sorry, once you insert the workflow inside a scenario. But having said that, when you insert either a task or a workflow in a scenario, you always have the option to selecting the position. So by selecting it here, that's not saying that this is the only position that can complete this workflow. This is just saying that it's the most likely position that's going to be completing this workflow. And so that's how you can start looking for content that already exists inside TransIT. But some people may not feel comfortable with the content that's already existing in TransIT, but you are really comfortable with the content that you already have at your organization. So let's say that's spreadsheets that you've been using for, X number of years that you feel really good about the content in those spreadsheets. You can take those spreadsheets and you can copy and paste those spreadsheets from Excel into TransIT. You can also use that same idea with spreadsheets that you may receive from your vendor. So I've got a few spreadsheets that I'm going to open here. So this spreadsheet here is for the different workflows for Echo. This is just an example that I have. And so this spreadsheet came from the vendor for the different workflows that are needed for this particular project. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to open our format. So if you go, if you go to reports here, and you go into training material, you can see that if you look under the TransIT 5 here, we've got functional script headings for import, and we also have process-based script headings for import. And so what that's going to do is that's going to be you can download those, and that's going to be a blank spreadsheet that gives you all of the column headers that needs to be used, whether using a process-based scenario or a functional style scenario. And so in this example here, this is a functional style scenario. So this has all of these different workflows that are listed at the bottom here. And so what I've done is in my functional scenario, all of those workflows I've called out as different sections in my spreadsheet here. And so let's say you don't have a particular project that has all the different workflows for the project included, but you do have just a whole collection of different workflows that you have. You could also just create a scenario that has any of the workflows that you want to include, just so that you can get them from Excel into TransIT. So you can use the same kind of idea where you call out the different section names in the section column here and have the section name match whatever your workflow is. So going back here, there is, I'm going to go to the beginning. The first tab here is echo replace order workflow. The next is stress echo standard workflow. And so when I go to my spreadsheet here, you can see that's how I've named all of the different sections in my scenario here. So we recommend that if you are wanting to get content from Excel into TransIT, that start by thinking of your things from a workflow perspective, and you can include those inside a functional style scenario. And then from there, once you do that, you can start to build out your workflows. So I'm going to use this particular scenario here. And so what I can do is I can highlight all of the fields. Sorry for the spinning. So I can highlight all of my fields here, and I did a Control C to copy, and I can go back to TransIT here. I'll go to my scenarios. And I had already created a shell that I'd be able to paste these steps into. So I've called this particular scenario Echo Workflows. And so when I go into my scenario here, I already copied from my Excel spreadsheet. So then I can right click this dark bar here, and I can say paste from clipboard. So there was, all right, there we go. And so when you do that, you want to make sure that you always take a look at this window to look for any errors. So if there was anything that was an error that TransIT doesn't have, it's going to highlight in red. So you want to make sure you do a spin through your whole window here. So it looks like in this case, I am good and I am able to paste this into TransIT. So I'm going to say save. And now you can see that I've got all of those steps from Excel into TransIT. So once I've done that, what I can then do is I can select the first row here. I can find the end of my section here. I can hold down Shift on my keyboard, select the last row, do a right click, and I can create workflow. When I do that, it's going to ask me for a workflow name. So I'm going to just call it you can call it whatever makes sense. I'm just going to do that for demonstration purposes. And so when I did that, you can see that now all of the steps that are in this particular workflow are listed here in the workflow column. And so by doing that, anytime I want all of these exact same steps inserted into a scenario, I can insert this particular workflow here, and it's going to bring in all of the steps that I see here. Now, before doing something like that, I would make sure that I went through and I looked at my steps here. And I can see that here at line 1, I have the cardiology tech signing into the application. And if I scroll lower, I can see that I have the physician signing in. So rather than having two tasks that are essentially doing the same thing, it's just a provider signing into an application, I may decide that I either want to look to see if there's existing content for signing into an application, or I can decide that I want to make one of these a reusable task and make it less specific. So take out what the specific position is who's signing in, because that information is listed here in the position column, and the login information is listed here in the login column. So maybe I want to update my task here, which I can do by doing edit task. It's going to tell me where it's being used. And so I could go here and I could edit my task, and I can make it less specific to just say launch power chart with this position. So I could just say launch power chart, because the information of who, like I said, and if I refresh, you can see my change here. It already tells me who it's supposed to be logging in as. And so that's for you to decide what makes sense for your updates here. But what I would recommend is anytime where I have, and so if I was to scroll through to all of the different workflows in here, obviously we've got the position logging in multiple different times. So from the copy and paste, it created multiple different individual tasks for logging into the application. And so that's obviously a very simple example, but you're better off to rather have a dozen, let's say, different tasks that all say the exact same thing. You're better off to insert this same task into each different spot where the position is logging in. And where it saves you time is if something needed to change in that task. If I updated that task, every single occurrence of that task will automatically be updated. Whereas if I didn't use the repeatable task, I'd have to find all of those individual tasks and make the same update, say a dozen different times, versus making that update one time. And so, as I said, I would recommend that if you're wanting to take a bunch of your workflows that are not inside TransIT yet, get them into the appropriate header format to get them into TransIT, copy and paste them in, and then use this feature to create your workflow from right within your scenario. And then once you're more comfortable with what content is in there, you may decide, okay, well, I'd rather not do a copy and paste because I know I already have some of this content in from when I did my previous copy and paste into TransIT. So another example I'm going to show when it comes to copying and pasting content into TransIT is showing some of the changes that you can make to your spreadsheet. So I hope that everybody's quite familiar with our header functionality. And so by using the header functionality, you can add things into the header that are going to repeat multiple times throughout your scenario. So that rather than having to update every single spot where the patient name is, for example, you can just type the patient name into the header and then use this patient name inside brackets. And that is going to make sure that every single time where you have patient name displayed inside brackets, that it pulls from the header rather than rather than having to type that information in over and over and over again. So there's a few different ways that you can update your spreadsheet to take advantage of our header or our details functionality. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like. I have this particular spreadsheet already inside TransIT, so I'm gonna show you what it looks like inside TransIT. So this is the only workflow in this particular scenario is just the workflow for registering a patient that's an existing patient that doesn't have a pre-reg completed again. But you can see that here are the steps. So we've got clicking the conversation, and then in the outcome here, in the black text, we have conversation. Conversations are displayed, and then we have all of these different options displayed in blue. If I was to click on this, you can see that this is a details field that I've typed a variety of different options into. If I look at what that looks like at the task level, the outcome is just conversations are displayed and there's a details field. And that just provides me with a text field that I can type information into at the scenario level. So I will close that. If I look at this, you can see here that if I click on this, you can see that I've got last name, comma, and then I've got patient name or patient last name listed inside brackets, same for first name and same for date of birth. Where I've got the brackets around patient last name, patient first name, and then date of birth, that information is saying I want to pull the information from the header. And so again, we'll look at this at the task level. At the task level, this particular row is right here. Type search criteria into fields, click search. And so there's just a single details field here. And so we've typed a bunch of different information into that single details field. So we've used a combination. So we've got details at the task level, which provided me with that field that I could type into at the scenario level. Plus, we've typed in some header details information as well. You can see here, I've got the same thing. So this is a patient name inside brackets. And let me search for, sorry. So this here says select patient name. What I could do is, sorry, that is going to pull from the header. But what I wanted to show actually is looking at it from the spreadsheet view and how these things are actually going to be different. So what I could have done here, so this is saying select patient, and we've got patient name pulling from the brackets. So at the task level, it's just a details field, and so that I can type into this field something different if I needed to. But let's say I decide that every single time that this particular step is completed, it's always going to be the patient's name. So at the task level, I can, instead of it saying details here, I can say patient name. And how that looks different is you can see that now it's shown in black text. So that means that at the scenario level, I have no flexibility of changing what that information is. So the benefit is that, you know, every single time that I use this particular task, I know that it's automatically going to pull in the patient name. Where you want to really think about that, though, whether it is better to have it at the task level or at the scenario level, is let's say you're dealing with something for a merge. And when the patient is first registered, let's say they arrive from a car accident and you don't know what the patient's name is, so they're registered as a John Doe. So you may want this to, instead of just automatically pulling the patient name from the header, I'm going to go back and change this back to details. And so I'm clicking refresh just to refresh my screen here. So the difference is at the scenario level, because at the task level, it just said details, and then I typed patient name inside brackets. When the patient's first registered, I said that their name is John Doe, but let's say down the road, we figured out let's say the patient became conscious again and we found out what their actual name is. We may want to be able to type into here patient name 2. So in your header, the patient name without a number field is going to be John Doe, whereas patient name 2 is going to be what the specific patient name is. So you need to decide, does it make sense that you want to be able to type something different in at the scenario level, or is it 100% of the time always going to be just the one single option that you want to pull in from the header? And so if you know 100% of the time that's the one thing that you want to pull in, you can type that information inside brackets at the task level. But if you want the flexibility of adding a number to it, then at the task level, you want to leave it as details, and you can type in the specific field name inside brackets inside your scenario. So I'm going to take out the 2 here because I don't want that. Oops. And so when I click this second icon here, this is turning on the toggle so that I can see what information is listed inside the header. So without that icon clicked, you can see I've got last name, and then I've got the header field for the last name and first name, date of birth, etc. And so if I want to see what details are actually pulled into those fields, I can click this icon here. Now you can see it's pulling in exactly what is listed inside those fields. So some of these things aren't completed inside the header. So obviously we want to make sure that we are completing all of these things inside the header. But where stuff is completed, you can see that it's pulled in. And so if I look at this from the spreadsheet perspective, this is what the spreadsheet looks like before it is brought into TransIT. And so here's the different ways that you can take advantage of the details and the header details functionality. So if we look at the way that this is listed here, you can see that there's a bracket starting at the add/modify person line, and then the ending of the bracket is down here at the pre-admit. So if I go back to my to TransIT here, you can see that this is how it pulls in. So if I want it to be listed out with a variety of different things listed inside my details field here, then I want to make sure that the bracket is listed here. So bracket on the outside, closing bracket here. Same thing here. So I've just got a single line here. I've got the bracket closing here and the bracket closing here. Where we see this here, so we've got the bracket starting here at last name, but then you can see that here, there's a bracket around patient last name, patient first name, date of birth. Where I come to TransIT here, sorry, let me turn my toggle off. So you can see that it's got both information just typed in, but it's also got a bracket used so that it's going to pull that information from the header. So this last name, first name, date of birth before the colon, we just want it to display like that. And then the details here inside the brackets, we want that specific information to pull from the header. And so that's how it's going to show if you've got a variety of different things all inside the same details field. If it's just a single option, then you can type it like you see here. So here it's got patient name typed inside a double bracket, and that's because we want the field to show, we want it to be a details field, but we want it to be a details field that has a header field being used inside the brackets here. Now, if I want, instead of any kind of functionality that's got header things, or I don't want to type in what that information is, and I just want a details placeholder, I can type details inside brackets here. And when I come back to my spreadsheet, it's going to show like this. So when you've got a details field that doesn't have information typed into it, it's going to say click to add details. And so when I do that, it opens that details window for me here. And so then I'd be able to type in whatever I needed to type in here so that it shows here. And so if you do have really good scenarios already existing inside Excel, and it's, you know, a better use of your time to update those spreadsheets and incorporate some of this header functionality, then by all means, go ahead and use the content that you already have. If that's going to save you time, then that's definitely what we want you to do. But we just want to make sure that you are aware that there's a ton of content that exists inside TransIT that is probably very useful to you, that can save you a lot of time in the long run. So the other thing is we want to make sure that when you are creating a scenario, that you're doing a good job to update your headers. So from within the scenario steps page, if I click this third icon here, that's going to open my header here. Or if I wanted to go from the scenario page here, then I could right click and edit header. Either way, that's going to open the header field for me here. From a process-based scenario, so an integrated scenario perspective, you want to make sure that when you're completing your header, you have as much information completed as possible. So have who your patient is, their date of birth, have a spot to document what their MRN and their FIN are once those are generated, what home medication is supposed to be used, what their allergies are, all of that different information, so that everybody who is going to be touching that patient during your round of testing knows exactly what the specific information is that's supposed to be documented for that patient, to make sure that you're having a controlled outcome at the end of your round of testing, so you know that you're testing things out effectively. And when it comes to a functional style scenario, make sure that you're calling out what all of these specific sections are for your functional scenario. And that will be helpful to the person who's responsible for coordinating your testing. So if all of your functional scenarios say exactly what workflows are being covered, what all the different workflows and sections are inside your scenario, they can open the header and they can see, okay, this particular scenario here is covering all of these different workflows. And then that way, if you're taking on a new package, they can see, okay, do I need to run all of this? Can I just run pieces of it? They can decide what components are going to be necessary to test out for your particular round of testing. I feel like I've done a lot of talking. Does anybody on the call have any questions about anything that I've shown here? Okay, I will take the silence as a no.
Information though. Thank you.
Sorry.
I said it's great information. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So I know that depending on where you're at as an organization, training with us may have been done a little while ago. So we thought it was a good opportunity to kind of refresh everybody on what some of the functionality is inside TransIT. I also want to remind people that when we do these lunch and learns, everything gets added to our private YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch these videos later, but also there's some videos that are training videos that I had done a little while ago when we launched this newer version of TransIT. So those are good tools to refer to if you're just wanting to get a refresher on how to do different things inside TransIT. But so, like I said at the beginning, not sure if everybody caught it, but this particular lunch and learn topic came to us as a request from one of our clients. And so if there are certain components of TransIT that you're not quite comfortable with and you'd like for us to use this time to go over some of that functionality, please send an email to us at support@makesolutionsInc.com, and we're happy to cover your topic at one of our lunch and learns, because it's entirely possible that the questions that you have, other people have those same questions. And so we want you to be as comfortable as possible when you're working inside TransIT. So we're happy to answer any of those questions for you. Is there anything else that anyone wants me to go over, or should we sign off? Okay, I will take the silence as a no. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Ange.